All right, so today we're going to deep dive into something I think we can all relate to, kind of nerve-wracking. Getting ready for a U.S. visa interview.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for us, we've got this English learning podcast that, really breaks down what to expect.
Yeah.
You know those moments where you wish you had a guidebook for these kind of tricky situations?
Right.
This deep dive is it.
I think a lot of times people preparing for this, they overlook the why, the reasoning behind the interview itself.
Mhm.
It's not just about answering some questions correctly or filling out the paperwork properly. It's really about demonstrating that you're a legitimate visitor who fully intends to return home.
That's such a good point. And, I remember when I was applying for visas, I was so focused on just getting the paperwork right. I didn't think about that big picture.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
This podcast, they actually use this funny example of someone getting a visa just because they were like the millionth applicant.
Right.
Obviously not how it really works.
Of course not.
But it highlights the elephant in the room, the concern about illegal immigration, which visa officers, that's like their job, right, to prevent that.
Right.
So knowing that, how should we approach these questions? I know this podcast gave some really specific guidelines.
It did, yeah. And I think, being specific is key here. Let's take that first question they're likely to ask.
Huh?
Where is your final destination? And what is the purpose of your trip to the United States?
Right.
You're going to need to know the city, A and D state. Don't just say New York if you're going to Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, the purpose of the visit, you really have to flesh that out. If you're visiting family, who are you visiting? Where do they live? If it's for a conference, what's the name of the conference? Who's hosting it? All those extra details, I think they really show they're not trying to hide anything.
It's like you're preemptively answering any doubts they might have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, that second question, this one seems simple. How long do you plan to remain in the United States? This is where it's so important to be consistent with what you put on your application. Any discrepancies are just going to raise red flags.
So, no, winging it, really thorough preparation is key.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. And that brings us to what this podcast calls the most important question. Tell me about the ties you have to your home country.
Yeah, I see why that one's so crucial. That's the heart of it, right? Showing that you have a reason to return.
Exactly, yeah. It's all about proving you've got strong reasons to leave the U.S. once your visit is over. The podcast uses this great analogy of ties being like ropes pulling you back home. So owning a house, having family there, a stable job, financial assets, these are your ropes.
Okay, so it's not just about stating those ties, but really making them tangible for the visa officer.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where having supporting documents ready, even if they don't specifically ask for them, can really set you apart. It's like providing evidence, to back up your story.
They actually gave a good example of that. They talked about an applicant who brought his bank statements without even being asked. It showed he was prepared and, on top of his finances.
Smart move. Subtly demonstrates that financial independence, which is another key factor. You may not always get asked about it directly, but proving you can support yourself without relying on U.S. resources is really important. It minimizes that risk in the visa officer's eyes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point about showing that financial independence. It's almost like you're saying, hey, I'm not trying to, be a burden. I can support myself. I'm just here to enjoy my visit and then head back home.
Exactly. It shows that you respect the rules and that you're being responsible. That goes a long way, I think, in these interviews.
Speaking of, this whole visa interview process and this English learning podcast that we're deep diving into, it focuses on the U.S. visa interview, but wouldn't these general principles apply to other countries too? Especially places that have stricter visa processes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the specific questions, maybe some of the required documents that might change from country to country, but the logic behind it, it's pretty universal, right? Yeah. They want to make sure that you're a genuine visitor. And the best way to do that is to show you've got those strong ties back home and, of course, the financial means to support your trip.
It's all about minimizing that risk, both for you, the applicant, and then the country that you're visiting.
Exactly.
Okay, so getting back to that financial stability piece, we talked about the bank statement example from the podcast, but that's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right.
What other financial documents do you think could help someone, kind of build that? I like to call it the fortress of credibility.
Yeah. Think of it as painting a picture. You want them to see the full scope of your financial situation. So a letter from your employer, confirming your salary, proof of investments if you own property, even things like credit card statements. I mean, if they show, responsible spending habits over time, it all contributes to a stronger application.
Right. So it's not just that you are financially capable of, like affording this trip, but that you also have, a history, a solid financial history back in your home country. It's not like you're starting from zero, so to speak.
Right, exactly. And again, it all ties back to that idea of strong ties, right? A stable financial history, a lot of times, implies stability in other areas of life, which just makes you a less risky applicant in their eyes.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. I think I was reading somewhere that confidence plays a huge role in these visa interviews. And I gotta say, like, having all this information at my fingertips, knowing what to expect, it definitely makes me feel more confident.
Oh, 100%. Like, when you understand the why behind the questions and you come prepared with those thoughtful answers and you've got the documents to back it up, that anxiety, it just starts to fade away, right?
Yeah, yeah. You're not just like, oh, I hope they approve me. It's more like, okay, I'm here. I'm prepared to like present my case, confidently.
Exactly. And that shift in mindset, I think, can make such a difference in how you come across during the interview itself.
It's amazing, when you really break down something like a visa interview, how much more confident you feel going into it.
Oh, for sure.
Instead of it being this big, scary, like, interrogation, it's like, okay, I've got this. I can tell my story, and I know what they're looking for.
It makes such a difference.
It really does. This English learning podcast that we've been using for this deep dive, they did a great job laying out, all the crucial stuff.
Yeah.
Those strong ties back home, showing you've got financial stability, being prepared with those documents.
Absolutely. Those are the pillars, right? And the stronger those pillars are, the smoother the whole process is going to be.
Yeah. Speaking of those pillars, we've been talking about all these documents, and I was thinking, like, okay, what about going above and beyond? Like, if someone really wants to make their application stand out, are there any, I don't know, any kind of additional documents beyond the usual suspects, so to speak?
Yeah, and that's where it becomes really personalized,
Yeah.
to your specific situation. So, for example, let's say you're visiting a friend or a relative, and they're a U.S. citizen. Having a letter of invitation from them where they're saying, hey, I'm so excited to have, so-and-so come visit. I'm happy to host them. And if needed, I can help support them financially. Yeah. That carries a lot of weight.
Right, because it's like an extra layer of reassurance, I guess, for that visa officer.
Exactly. Or let's say you're a freelancer, right?
Mm.
And you've got this amazing track record. Bring a portfolio of your work, testimonials from clients. Things that show, hey, even though I'm not traditionally employed, I'm still, I have a steady income. I've got this great professional reputation.
So it's really about anticipating those questions, those concerns, and kind of proactively addressing them.
Exactly. Exactly. It shows you're not just like, giving those generic answers. You've actually thought it through.
You're one step ahead. This has been such an insightful deep dive. We really went from like, oh my gosh, these visa interview questions to like, okay, I've got the knowledge, I've got the tools, I can approach this strategically.
Preparation is key.
It really is.
And it's not just about the documents themselves. It's like we were saying, it's understanding the why, behind everything, crafting those really strong answers and projecting that confidence.
Yeah, so as you're getting ready for that interview, remember, it's a chance for you to tell your story. Showcase those strong ties, show them your financial stability, and let that genuine excitement shine through. Like you are genuinely excited to experience all that the U.S. has to offer.
I do it with a smile, knowing that, you've got this.
You got this. That's it for today's deep dive, everyone. We hope you feel, more prepared, more informed, and maybe even like a little excited about that visa interview. Until next time, happy travels.